In the 3rd year since Wendy Scott established her bridal studio, her first love and childhood sweetheart was getting married and invited her to personally design the wedding dress for his beloved. A friend request popped up on WeChat. In a daze, Wendy accepted it. The name was E, and the profile picture was blank. Wendy accepted the request, which was obviously from the groom rather than the bride, and sent a message first. "You could have just let Faye Lewis add me. After all, the design is for her." At the top of the chat, typing appeared and disappeared over and over again. Wendy held her phone, waiting patiently. "E, my idea is not to tell her yet. I want to give her a surprise once there's a preliminary finished product." Wendy wonders, what if she isn't satisfied with the design? E, don't worry, I know her preferences. Seeing such a confident statement, a wave of bitterness rose in Wendy's heart. After all, when they were together, Ethan Wright didn't even know if she preferred strawberry or chocolate ice cream. Yet now, he could say with such certainty that he knew her. Ethan had never even given her a single bouquet of flowers, yet now he was painstakingly preparing a surprise. It turned out it wasn't that he couldn't remember, he just didn't want to. It wasn't that he was dull and unromantic. He just hadn't met the person worth his effort back then. Wendy wasn't that person. Faye Lewis was. Ethan had secretly loved Faye for many years to no avail. Wendy just happened to show up, chasing after him relentlessly, so thick-skinned that she couldn't be driven away. So the man agreed, perhaps to provoke his childhood sweetheart who had always treated him like a brother. When Wendy and Ethan were together, there were plenty of happy memories. Maybe there were moments when Ethan tried to like Wendy. But not liking someone is just not liking them. When Wendy ran to find Ethan in a breakdown back then, she heard Faye ask him, "You're actually pretty serious about Wendy, aren't you?" The man chuckled lightly, then said indifferently, "Is that so?" To be honest, regarding her, she didn't hear the rest. Wendy didn't dare to listen and ran away. She went back and agreed to her mother's request to go abroad. At the airport, she sent one last message, "Let's break up." Then she blocked all of Ethan's contact information. They hadn't seen each other for 8 years since. 8 years sounds long, but in Wendy's life, it felt like the fast-forward button had been pressed. It passed in a flash. It felt like just yesterday she was huddled in the school's sewing room frantically finishing assignments, and today she was standing in her own studio. It felt like she was just kissing the person she liked, and today she received the news that he was getting married. The bride wasn't her, and she had to make the wedding dress for this wedding, wishing them a happy ending. 6:26 p.m. Wendy was alone in the studio. She sat at her desk, looking up at the clock on the wall. The closer it got to the agreed time, the more nervous Wendy felt. She couldn't focus on anything. 6:31 p.m. He was late. Wendy lowered her head and sighed softly, flipping through the prepared sketches. Her phone screen lit up. Her best friend, Summerfields, sent a few photos. Wendy looked at the 2 smiling faces on the screen and unconsciously curled her lips. "Wendy!" A cold voice rang out. Wendy's back stiffened. She hurriedly typed a few replies and turned off her phone. She turned around, feeling a bit dazed when she saw the person in front of her. The man was wearing a brown coat over a fitted turtleneck sweater, hands in his pockets. His features were sharper than before, his figure tall, exuding the charm of a mature man. He looked at Wendy with calm eyes. His beautiful eyes weren't as cold as in the past, but there was no emotion in them either. When looking at Wendy, it was as if he were looking at an old acquaintance with whom he had no ties. Wendy didn't have time to drop the smile from her face, so she forced a greeting. "Hello, Mr. Wright." Ethan didn't follow this strictly business tone. Instead, he exchanged pleasantries. "Long time no see, Wendy." His dark eyes seemed to hide emotions Wendy couldn't understand. It was a bit daunting and a bit uncomfortable. "Let's talk over here." Wendy looked away, grabbed the sketches on the table, and walked toward the meeting room. "I have a few preliminary designs here." Wendy spread the papers out one by one, looking down professionally. "Please see if any match your expectations, or if you're satisfied with any. We can adjust the design based on that." In the not-so-large space, there was only the soft sound of turning pages for a moment. Wendy stared at the man's hands, large, slender, with well-defined knuckles. They looked good holding anything. She used to have many sketches of those hands in her sketchbook, holding a pen, turning a book page, holding hers. She didn't know if that notebook still existed. Maybe she threw it away when she left, or maybe it was stuffed in a junk box, gathering dust. Ethan remained silent, looking at the sketches longer than expected. Wendy suddenly felt nervous and insecure. Noticing she had forgotten to pour water, she hesitated and started to speak. "Would you like to drink? Is there one in here that you like?" "Huh." Wendy froze for a moment and looked at the man. Ethan didn't look up. His gaze was still on the sketches in his hand, his face expressionless. It was so natural that Wendy wondered if she had hallucinated. She opened her mouth, hesitating on whether to reply. Hearing no response, Ethan looked up and raised an eyebrow slightly. This expression was very familiar. It meant, "Why aren't you talking?" Wendy sadly discovered that even after so many years, she could still instantly read Ethan's silent expressions. It was muscle memory formed from constantly studying him in the past. She forced a smile and said, "What designer doesn't like their own work? I drew them, so of course I like them all." Ethan nodded, then mentioned, "I remember you designed a set for yourself in college. It doesn't seem to be in here." The corners of Wendy's mouth stiffened. She almost guessed the meaning behind the man's words but still couldn't believe it. "What do you mean?" "I think that one was very good, and it matches Faye's taste." "Let's make that one," Ethan said casually, placing the materials on the table. The hands resting on her lap slowly tightened. Wendy looked into the man's eyes, which held no warmth, wondering, is this revenge? Is this humiliation? Or maybe he simply thinks that one is good, his fiancée will like it, and nothing else matters or needs consideration. She seemed to dig her heels in, squeezing out a business smile. "Okay," Ethan left. Wendy sat at her workbench and pulled up that design on her computer. That was a work created when she was at her brightest and most spirited. It was raw and immature, but it held all her feelings and aspirations. She once thought this drawing would never become a reality. She didn't expect the day would come, but the owner wouldn't be her. Wendy picked up her pen and began to refine the drawing. As she drew, she suddenly started crying. "Wendy, let's get married as soon as we graduate, okay? Wendy, did you design this for yourself? You'll look beautiful in it." "Babe?" Memories flooded in, overwhelming and swallowing Wendy, trapping her in a quagmire of sorrow she couldn't escape. Her phone rang suddenly. Through her tear-blurred vision, Wendy made out the name Summer. She wiped her face and answered. A tender child's voice came from the other end of the line. "Mommy, when are you coming home today?" "Ethan," the young man was walking along the campus path with a backpack over one shoulder when a smiling face suddenly popped up in front of him. Wendy grinned and said, "What a coincidence, Mr. Scholar, are you going to study hall?" Ethan looked at the person who had coincidentally met him countless times. He nodded coldly in acknowledgement and tried to walk around her. "Hey, wait for me." In the first semester of their sophomore year, Wendy met Ethan at Faye Lewis's birthday party. Wendy didn't know Faye, and they were in different majors, but her best friend Summer Fields was a social butterfly. She got familiar enough to drag Wendy along to play. When they entered the karaoke room, it was noisy people howling songs, playing games, drinking. Wendy spotted Ethan sitting on the side at a glance. His posture was casual and cold, seemingly out of place in the heated environment, yet not abrupt. The flickering lights hid his face. Wendy's heart suddenly became very quiet, so quiet that she could only hear the drumming sound of her own heartbeat. "Hey, who's that over there?" After sitting down, Wendy leaned over and whispered into her friend's ear. "Who?" Summer looked over, squinting. "Oh, that's Ethan, right? The idol of the medical department. Faye's childhood sweetheart, I think." "Ethan, right." Wendy silently recited the name in her heart, deciding she liked even his name. The girl who had been single for nearly 20 years fell in love at first sight just like that, launching a fierce, reckless offensive. Asking for contact info, asking about preferences, finding topics to chat about, waiting at spots to strike up conversations. Ethan looked cold and aloof, but he wasn't completely arrogant or ignoring her. He was polite and restrained with Wendy, like soft cotton but also like ice that couldn't be warmed. "Ethan, have you had dinner? What did you eat?" "Pasta." "Good that you ate." "I haven't eaten yet, but I'm not hungry." "You need to eat 3 meals on time." "It's fine, I'm used to it, hahaha. I don't feel like eating when I'm busy with assignments. Think of it as a diet." Ethan glanced at the person beside him and said indifferently, "You're already very thin." She was indeed thin. She had slender arms and legs to begin with, and a small face. Recently, busy with finals, her chin had become even sharper. She also liked wearing oversized clothes. When the wind blew, she felt empty inside them, as if she might float away at any moment. Wendy took it as a compliment, hiding her face in her sleeves and giggling. She chirped all the way until they walked into the library. Wendy automatically fell silent, hugging her things and sitting obediently next to Ethan. Ethan quickly entered study mode, focusing on reviewing professional courses that gave Wendy a headache just looking at them. Wendy had just spent the whole afternoon in the sewing room busy with assignments. If it weren't for waiting for Ethan, she would have slept directly on the classroom floor by now. Stifling a yawn, Wendy slowly lay down on the table. Her gaze shifted from the boy's expressionless profile down to his fingers holding the pen. When writing, the joints of his fingers created beautiful lines. Wendy stared for a while, then suddenly lost her mind and reached out a finger to touch his hand. Ethan's hand paused, and he turned his head to look over. Having just taken advantage of him, Wendy's face felt hot, and she turned her face to the other side to avoid him. Ethan didn't say anything either. After a few seconds, the scratching sound of writing resumed. Her heart was beating a bit fast. Wendy listened to the soft sounds beside her and buried her face deeper into her arms. When she opened her eyes again, the library closing music was playing. Wendy rubbed her eyes and sat up. Ethan was sitting next to her, looking down at his phone. Awake, I accidentally fell asleep, hee. Let's go. The boy had already packed his things. He shouldered his backpack and prepared to leave. Wendy hurriedly stuffed the things on the table into her bag and followed him. There were very few people on campus late at night. The somewhat chilly night wind blew across the dry leaves on the ground, quiet and desolate. So cold, so cold, so cold, Wendy muttered softly while glancing at the person beside her now and then. For some reason, after waking up, Ethan's mood seemed to have changed a bit, though she couldn't tell if it was good or bad. Wendy. Ethan suddenly stopped walking. Wendy turned around in confusion. The boy's face was cold, his tone calm, but the words he spoke were, "You're chasing me, right?" Wendy felt her face burn up instantly. She stammered, unable to speak. "You like me?" Wendy's eyes dodged, afraid to look at the face opposite her. After holding it in for a long time, she blurted out, "Yeah, that's right. Want a date?" Wendy, whose body had been swaying nervously, suddenly froze. She stared at the ground, raised her head hesitantly, widened her eyes, and uttered, "Huh." Ethan's eyes seemed to carry a hint of a smile. He asked again with extreme patience, "Do you want a date?" "Yes." Wendy was dizzy from being hit by the jackpot that fell from the sky. She completely failed to notice that something seemed off about this conversation to confirm the relationship. She just hurriedly grabbed the person she liked and plunged into the dream of love. Later, she learned that on that day, Faye Lewis had got into a relationship. "Mommy," hearing the drawn-out cry from the phone, Wendy snapped back to reality and rubbed her eyes. "Hey, what's wrong? Why aren't you back yet? It's so late, Auntie Summer is already asleep. Okay, I'm coming back right away." When she got home and opened the door, a little girl threw herself at her. Summer followed behind, yawning, arms crossed and leaning against the wall. "Boss Scott is finally back." Wendy hugged the girl and said somewhat apologetically, "Sorry to trouble you, Sum. It's so late." Lifting the bag in her hand, she smiled and said, "I brought cake. A pastry chef client gave it to me today." The big one and the little one cheered, took it, sat on the carpet, and started eating. Wendy leaned back on the sofa, watching them with amusement. Her gaze landed on the small figure digging into the cake. Wendy asked softly, "Was Nina good today? Did she cause trouble for Auntie Summer?" Nina Scott waved her fork. "No way, Auntie Summer and I get along great. Our Nina Bear is very well behaved," Summer grinned. Auntie Summer loves playing with Nina. Years ago, when Wendy ran abroad and found out she was pregnant at the hospital, she thought for a long time but decided to keep the baby. When Ryan Jones found out, he was silent for a long time, his expression complex. In the end, he just frowned and sighed, saying nothing. Summer, on the other hand, was furious. While crying, she scolded Wendy for losing her mind, but she couldn't bring herself to say anything about abortion. Nina was 8 years old this year. She looked like a classic beauty, had a lively and cute personality, and everyone loved her. All these years, although it was hard, Wendy never felt regret. Nina was the best gift heaven had given her, her greatest comfort in this world. But after seeing Ethan today, she suddenly felt an inescapable guilt toward Nina. Summer clamored that it was too late and insisted on staying over. After turning off the lights, the two lay in bed whispering. "Did something happen to you today?" They had known each other for too long and been close for too long. Having accompanied each other through so much time, Summer noticed at a glance that Wendy was hiding something. In the darkness, Wendy blinked slowly and whispered, "I worked overtime today because of a client." "That client is Ethan Wright." "What?" Summer sat up abruptly, screaming in horror. Wendy was startled and pulled her back down. "Ouch, keep it down, Nina is asleep." "It's not me," Summer glared, but lowered her volume. "You're just telling me now? How did you two get in touch?" "He knew I opened a studio and emailed me an invitation." Summer's face looked bad. He approached you for a collaboration? He's getting married?" "Yeah. To who?" "Faye Lewis." Summer made an ambiguous tusk sound, was silent for a while, and then asked, "And you agreed?" "I agreed." "Why turn down business?" Wendy said with a smile. Summer wanted to say something else, opened her mouth, then swallowed it back, muttering, "What a mess." She poked her best friend's forehead with her finger. "Stop smiling, sister. It looks bitter." "No, I'm not." Wendy stopped smiling and shrank into the blanket, rebutting softly. Summer couldn't be bothered to argue with her, just feeling a sourness in her heart. "How did you feel when you saw him?" "Didn't feel anything. It's been so many years." Wendy's eyes looked a bit vacant. "Besides, he's here to get married." "But Summer, today I suddenly thought, isn't it unfair not to tell Nina who her father is?" Since she could remember, I told her that not everyone has a mom and a dad. She only has a mom. Nina is very good. She never cries asking why she doesn't have a dad or where he is. But she must think about these things in her heart. Seeing Ethan today, I wondered if I'm being selfish. Should I tell them the truth? The woman's voice was soft and gentle, making Summer inexplicably sad, her eyes getting a bit wet. "What is there to say?" she frowned. "Nina Bear just has you as a mother. You've worked so hard all these years, everyone can see that." "What is Ethan Wright? That heartless jerk scumbag is finally getting his happy ending with his dream girl. If you tell him he has a daughter for no reason, who knows what will happen? In my opinion, you shouldn't have taken this job. He hurt you so much back then, and you're making a wedding dress for his wife. Are you stupid? I'm seriously done with you." Seeing her friend getting emotional, Wendy immediately covered her ears, closed her eyes, and pretended to sleep. "Now you're ignoring me?" Summer complained softly, then added, "Anyway, since you took it, just finish it. Don't contact him after it's done." "You can't fall into the same pit twice, Wendy Bear." Ethan, on the dim path by the lake, a man and a woman walked slowly holding hands. The girl hooked her other arm through the boy's and leaned in. "Do you know what day it is the day after tomorrow?" Ethan asked absent-mindedly. "What?" Wendy puffed out her cheeks, pretending to be angry. "My birthday? How do you not even know my birthday? You never mentioned it to me, I didn't know." Ethan frowned, his tone calm. Wendy suddenly felt a bit stifled, but couldn't find words to refute. She hadn't actively mentioned it, but they had been dating for a few months. He should have asked around and known even if she didn't say it. Seeing the girl stay silent for a moment, Ethan rarely sensed his girlfriend's unhappy mood. After thinking for a while, he said, "I'll take you out to eat the day after tomorrow. There will be a gift, too." "Okay." Wendy looked up and smiled, seeming to be coaxed. Ethan took Wendy to a rooftop restaurant in the city center. The location was on an open-air balcony with a wide view, overlooking the city's nightscape. Actually, Wendy had been to countless high-end restaurants with her parents growing up. She didn't really like this condescending sense of exquisite coldness, but she still gave face, looking out the window with a look of delight. "It's so beautiful. I'm glad you like it." Ethan seemed to have no interest in the scenery either, looking down at the menu without sparing an extra glance. "What do you want to eat?" "You order." Wendy propped her head up and admired her boyfriend. Simple white t-shirt and cardigan, how could this person wear them so well? Ethan quickly ordered with the waiter and picked up his glass to drink some water. Noticing Wendy's gaze, he raised an eyebrow slightly. "What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that?" Nothing. Wendy quietly straightened her back a bit more, pretending to naturally brush her hair aside, revealing one side of her collarbone and shoulder. The evening breeze was a bit cold, but she took off her coat after sitting down. However, Ethan was a bit too unromantic, giving absolutely no feedback on her outfit today. "Idiot," Wendy complained silently in her heart, and the subject of her complaint was looking down at his phone expressionlessly, as if replying to messages. "Who are you chatting with?" Wendy felt a bit neglected and craned her neck to ask. "Project Matters." "Oh," Wendy responded sullenly. She wanted to say, "Can't you put it aside while celebrating my birthday?" But seeing the focused look on the person in front of her, she swallowed it back. Fortunately, Ethan didn't have the habit of looking at his phone while eating. After the food was served, he finally brought his attention back. Wendy chattered about random topics. When talking about some funny things, seeing the corners of Ethan's mouth hook up slightly made her very happy. Suddenly, the phone screen on the table lit up again. Ethan glanced at it and picked it up. Wendy observed his expression, her hand holding the fork tightening unconsciously. She suddenly had a bad feeling. Sure enough, after Ethan quickly typed a few words, he stood up preparing to leave. "Where are you going?" Wendy was anxious, her knife and fork clinking against the plate making a harsh sound. Ethan didn't look at Wendy. He just stared at his phone and frowned. Faye was sent to the ER with acute gastroenteritis. "I'm going to check on her." He pointed casually at the bag on the seat. "That's the birthday gift. Go back by yourself later, I'm leaving first." But before Wendy could speak, the man had already left in a hurry. She stared blankly at her boyfriend's retreating figure. "But today, isn't it my birthday? Aren't I your girlfriend? Why? Why could you choose to abandon me without hesitation? Miss, hello, we are serving your dessert now." "Oh, okay, thank you." The waiter politely placed the mousse cake on the table. "Please enjoy." Wendy looked at the bright red strawberry on the mousse and stopped the waiter who was about to walk away. Do you have chocolate flavor?" "Yes, would you like to switch to that one?" "Yeah, I prefer chocolate." In fact, she didn't like strawberry-flavored desserts at all. Wendy picked up the bag he mentioned. Inside was a box. She opened it. A delicate bracelet with a subtle shimmer lay quietly inside. Beautiful, exquisite, expensive. But Wendy shifted her gaze to her left hand. There was an identical bracelet there. The cold night wind blew, and Wendy shivered. So cold. Wendy spent several days in the studio, from drawing the final draft to making the garment. Her body was exhausted, but her heart held a stubborn energy. Even if the person wearing the wedding dress wasn't her, even if she didn't end up with the only person she loved, she still wanted to make this design the best it could be. Consider it drawing a final, complete period on her youthful dream. Wendy stood in front of the mannequin, quietly gazing at the wedding dress that had taken shape. Cloud-shaped off shoulder neckline, fishtail waist, floor-length tulle. The patterns combined Chinese rui motifs with floral designs, and the fabric wasn't pure white, but carried a hint of pale blue. It was almost exactly the same as the initial concept in her mind during college. She finally made it. From using her eyes for a long time, Wendy's eyes were very dry. She took off her glasses, leaned back against the long work table, and lifted her hand covered in band-aids to gently rub her eyes. "Miss Scott," Sam Evans knocked on the door and poked his head in. "Mr. Wright is here. He says he wants to see the finished garment." "Okay, let him in." Wendy didn't turn her head, replying directly. Unrushed footsteps approached Wendy and stopped beside her. "What do you think? Are you satisfied?" Ethan examined it for a while, then reached out to touch it gently. He didn't stint on his praise. "It's very beautiful." Then he asked, "Is it the same as what you envisioned when you first designed it?" Wendy smiled. "Pretty much." Feeling uncomfortable inside, as if a small thorn were constantly pricking her, Wendy couldn't help but say deliberately, "It was made entirely according to my ideas. I like it, of course, but are you sure the bride won't have any objections at all?" Aside from the necessary body measurements, Ethan hadn't made any additional requests. Wendy was troubled at first. She knew Faye Lewis, but she didn't really understand her, let alone after so many years. In the end, she just gave up. Since she was using her original design anyway, and since she could never wear it, she might as well let the fantasy come true. Hearing the hidden sharpness in these words, Ethan didn't react much. He said flatly, "I trust you. I think she will definitely like this wedding dress too." Like punching cotton, Wendy couldn't help but turn her head to look at the man beside her. His gaze was fixed on the wedding dress mannequin. His eyes seemed a bit distracted, yet his expression was serious. Is he imagining what Faye will look like wearing it? Wendy suddenly thought. Her dry eyes began to ache again, but she stared blankly at the man beside her, forgetting to close her eyes, her eyelashes trembling slightly. Wendy, Ethan withdrew his gaze and looked back. Not seeing you for so long, you've become a very mature and impressive designer. Your dream has come true. Congratulations. No, it hasn't come true. In my dream, you were supposed to be there. It can never come true now. Long hours of work made Wendy's emotions fragile and sentimental. She couldn't hold it back, and tears welled up in her eyes. In her blurred vision, she couldn't see Ethan's expression clearly, but she saw his hand slowly reaching out, as if to wipe away her tears. Just as the hand was about to touch her skin, Wendy reacted. She stood up straight abruptly and dodged to the side. The movement was a bit sudden. Wendy's vision began to darken, and her consciousness became unclear. She struggled to stand there, blinking blankly and shaking her head. Until she closed her eyes completely, Wendy fell into a strange yet familiar embrace. Drip, drip. The quiet room only had the sound of soft, rhythmic dripping. Wendy's consciousness gradually returned, but her eyelids were still heavy, unable to open. Her right hand seemed to be held by someone. The temperature was high, forming a sharp contrast with Wendy's chronically cold fingers. The places covered with band-aids were stroked carefully, seemingly with a sense of heartache and cherishing. Who is it? Wendy's mind was still a bit fuzzy. She didn't move for a moment, perhaps subconsciously craving this warmth. She was too tired. She hadn't slept well recently and groggily fell asleep again. When she woke up again, she opened her eyes and confirmed she was in a hospital ward. Her hand wasn't being held, nor was it being touched. That temperature and sensation made her doubt if it was a hallucination. In the ward, there was only Ethan sitting expressionlessly to the side. He tilted his head to look at her. Awake? Ah, Wendy responded blankly, propping herself up to sit. Anemia plus hypoglycemia and overwork. The IV drip is finished, Ethan said faintly. But for some reason, Wendy suspected a hint of unhappiness in his calm tone. Wendy deliberated and said, Thank you. Sorry to trouble you. It's fine. For a moment, no one spoke. Wendy sat leaning back, spacing out, her hand unconsciously picking at a band-aid. Ethan suddenly stood up and walked out of the ward. Wendy looked at his back, guessing he probably saw she was awake and okay, so he planned to leave. Honestly, Ethan staying until now was already giving her a lot of face, but leaving straight away without a word like this. Wendy felt a bit disappointed inside. What are you thinking? He's getting married. She revealed a self-mocking smile, lifted the blanket to get out of bed, planning to return to the studio. Unexpectedly, the person who had just walked away returned. Ethan kept his hand on the doorknob without moving, frowning as he said, Where are you going? Wendy froze in place, her gaze shifting down to the restaurant bag in the man's other hand. I thought you left, so I wanted to go back. As she spoke, she watched the man walk in, take the food container out of the bag, place it on the table, and open it. Ethan said indifferently, Come over and eat. Wendy didn't refuse. She sat down silently and picked up the spoon. Because she really was a bit hungry, and because the soup from Jade Palace was really fragrant, she had liked it since college. She lowered her head and ate in small bites, chewing slowly. Ethan's gaze stayed on her the whole time, making her inexplicably uncomfortable. He suddenly asked, Do you have stomach problems? It hurts occasionally, Wendy answered somewhat guiltily. Ethan stopped talking. He felt a bit angry. Why is this person even worse at taking care of herself than when she was a student? Not eating on time, not resting properly, tormenting herself until she fainted. He still remembered his heart stopping when he watched Wendy collapse in front of him. She felt so light falling into his arms, so thin, like a piece of paper that could float away at any moment, and he couldn't catch her no matter what. When do you plan to bring Faye Lewis for the fitting? The woman in front of him asked without looking up. Ethan stared silently for a few seconds, then replied casually, In a while. She's been on a business trip abroad recently. Wendy nodded, looking down and stirring the soup absent-mindedly. Leaving the hospital, Ethan said naturally, Where do you live? I'll drive you back. Wendy hesitated. No need, I'll go back to the stew. Ethan remained expressionless, but Wendy suddenly chickened out and swallowed her words. Okay. The car ride was silent. Wendy sat in the passenger seat staring out the window in a daze. suddenly thinking if this was inappropriate. If Faye knew, would she be unhappy? After all, the passenger seat seems to have a different meaning. But then she thought, perhaps only when the love given isn't enough do suspicion and jealousy arise. Just like herself back then. And Faye Lewis is someone who will be loved wholeheartedly. She possesses enough confidence and assurance. She blinked gently, didn't turn her head, and asked with feigned casualness, "Will you send me an invitation to the wedding?" The emotions in Ethan's eyes deepened slightly, and his hand gripping the steering wheel tightened for a moment. After a few seconds, he answered in a deep voice, "I will." "Uncle Ryan, I want to play that." As soon as they entered the amusement park, Nina grabbed the man's hand and ran towards the roller coaster. Okay. Ryan Jones couldn't help laughing at the little girl jumping up and down with excitement, allowing himself to be dragged along. Wendy followed beside the two with a smile. Ryan had been busy for quite a while and finally found time to fulfill his promise to take Nina to the amusement park. Nina and Ryan had always had a good relationship. Having not seen him for so long, she was clinging to him tightly, leaving Wendy, her own mother, somewhat neglected for the moment. "Wendy, are you going on it?" Ryan turned his head to ask. The woman waved her hand. "You two go ahead. I'll take pictures for you from down here." When she was a young girl, Wendy used to like thrilling rides. Now, maybe because she was older and physically weaker, plus tired from added work, she only wanted to ride the merry-go-round. Wendy stood below, holding the camera, waving at the two playing, snapping photos click-clack. "Ah, this is too childish, I don't want to wear." Her hand lowering to check the photos paused. Wendy turned to look. It was a young couple, looking no more than 20. The girl was standing on tiptoes, putting a little devil horn headband on the boy's head. The boy had a bitter face, complaining verbally, but still obediently lowered his head to accommodate the girl's hands. "No way, it's so cute, babe," the girl said, grinning while adjusting it. The boy adjusted the headband uncomfortably, pouting but daring not to speak out. "Mua," the girl leaned in and kissed his cheek to coax him. The boy curled his lips in secret delight and led her away by the hand to another place. Wendy watched their intimate retreating figures, somewhat lost in thought. A cold-faced boy wearing cat ears suddenly appeared in her mind. "I don't want to wear it." He raised his hand to take it off. Wendy grabbed his arm and hugged it. "Wear it, it's so cute." Ethan was silent for a few seconds before squeezing out 3 words, "I'm not cute." Noticing sharply that the boy's earlobes were a bit red, Wendy got even more excited. "It is cute, wear it, wear it." She put on a pitiful look and acted coquettishly. "Please, brother?" Ethan turned his head and closed his eyes, eventually silently compromising. Wendy revealed a triumphant smile, cheered, and dragged him to play other attractions. Memories that should have blurred long ago suddenly became very clear. The couple's figures had long disappeared, but Wendy was still staring in that direction in a daze. "Mommy, I want to see the photos." Nina and Ryan had finished playing and came out. The little girl jumped in front of her and said loudly, "Oh, okay." Wendy snapped back to reality and squatted down to show her daughter. Nina checked the photos with a serious expression, then pouted. "Only these few?" "Sorry, Mommy will take more for you later, okay?" Wendy said apologetically. Little Miss Scott was very magnanimous and didn't criticize her absent-minded mother further. "Okay, then I want ice cream, sure." Wendy smiled. Nina skipped over. Ryan and Wendy fell a few steps behind. He turned to look at Wendy and asked gently, "Are you okay? What were you thinking about just now? You looked a bit pale." Wendy smiled at him. "Nothing, just busy with work lately, a bit tired." The ice cream line reached them, and the 3 of them ordered one each. The clerk was a lively young girl. As she handed over the ice cream, she smiled and said, "Your family is so good-looking." Wendy was just about to wave her hand to explain when Nina already loudly replied, "Thank you, sister, you're pretty too." Wendy had to helplessly shut her mouth. Meeting Ryan's gaze, he also looked helpless. Long ago, Ryan told Wendy that Nina secretly asked him if he could be with her mom and be her dad. Ryan said no. She was a bit disappointed and confused. "Why? Don't you like Nina?" "I do like you. Our Nina is so cute and good. Doesn't Uncle treat you well too?" Nina thought for a moment and asked again. "Then don't you like my mommy? You've known each other for so long and have such a good relationship." "I like her," Ryan laughed, "but not that kind of like. Nina, having a good relationship is different from being together." Nina couldn't quite understand. She nodded as if she understood but didn't really. But she didn't give up. Relying on things she learned from who knows which TV drama, she pretended to naturally create various opportunities to bring them together. Wendy and Ryan could guess her little thoughts at a glance, of course. Both laughing and crying, they played along with the child's game of house. Suddenly, Wendy glimpsed a somewhat familiar figure out of the corner of her eye. She frowned and leaned forward to look, but found nothing. "What's wrong?" "Saw someone you know." Ryan also looked in that direction. "I don't know, maybe I saw wrong." Meanwhile, on the other side, a woman wearing sunglasses and a hat hid behind a wall waited quietly for a while, peeked out, and saw the three of them walking away together. She hurriedly took a few photos with her phone and sent them to someone. Holding down the record button, she spoke excitedly. "Holy crap, bro, they look like they're married with a kid. What chance do you have?" They played until very late before going back. On the drive, Nina was so tired she fell asleep nestled in Wendy's arms. Wendy leaned back against the seat, gently patting her daughter. "I heard from Summer." Inside the quiet car cabin, Ryan suddenly spoke. Wendy froze for a moment, met Ryan's eyes in the rearview mirror, and realized what he was talking about. She smiled. "What's with that look?" Ryan moved his gaze to look ahead while driving. "He's really getting married? Asking you to make the dress?" "Yeah." "With that childhood friend of his?" "Yeah." Ryan didn't speak for a long while, just sighed. He glanced at the soundly sleeping Nina in the rearview mirror. "Did you tell him about Nina?" Wendy shook her head. "What's the point of telling? It's all in the past, and I was the one who wanted to have her." "But he is the child's father after all. Although Nina is very sensible, judging from how she keeps trying to set us up, she probably still wants a father." Wendy lowered her head and gently stroked Nina's head. "It's best this way right now. I have my life, he has his marriage. There's no need to break this balance. Staying out of each other's lives is fine. We won't see each other again anyway." Ryan frowned, seemingly dissatisfied with Wendy's evasive attitude. "But," Wendy called his name, interrupting, "Ethan doesn't like me. Telling him I secretly had a child after we broke up years ago would only cause misunderstanding and trouble." Ryan didn't say anything more, only sighed again. When the car arrived downstairs at the apartment complex, Ryan unbuckled his seatbelt and got out to open the door for Wendy. "I'll walk you up." The man reached out, wanting to take Nina. Wendy waved her hand and carried her daughter out of the car. The kid was sleeping deeply. Wendy whispered, "No need, it's quite late, you should go back early." Ryan didn't insist. He leaned over to pat Nina's head and also lowered his voice. "All right, I'm leaving then. Contact me if anything happens." "Mhem." Wendy watched the car drive away, hoisted the child up a bit, and turned to go upstairs. In the quiet residential area, a cold voice suddenly appeared. "Wendy." The woman's back stiffened, her scalp tingled, her pupils dilated slightly, suspecting she was hallucinating, afraid to identify the voice's owner. Her hands holding Nina tightened. She didn't look back. The owner of the voice didn't let her off and called again, closer this time. Wendy turned around slowly. The person in front of her was the very person discussed in the car just now, Ethan Wright. He stood at the bottom of the steps, half his body shrouded in darkness, the expression on his face indiscernible. Wendy noticed his gaze was on the sleeping child in her arms. She nervously freed one hand to rest on the back of the child's head. Last time leaving the hospital, Ethan drove her home and learned where she lived. But Wendy couldn't figure out why he would suddenly appear here at this time. "Why are you here?" The man didn't answer directly, nor did he look at Wendy. He stared fixedly at the sleeping child, his voice flat. "Your child?" Wendy's lips pressed together until they were somewhat pale. It was a completely unforeseen situation. But in this situation, she wasn't willing to deny it, only saying, "Yes." Ethan's expression seemed to change in that instant, yet it also seemed to remain completely ripple-less. He finally looked up at Wendy. Then he smiled a little. Wendy's pupils trembled slightly. It was clearly an inexplicable and tense scene, yet she felt sad for no reason. Ethan's gaze was heavy, like thick ink that couldn't dissolve, hiding countless suppressed and complex emotions. He actually performed several surgeries today. His body was exhausted. But when he heard the voice message from Faye, looking at the photos she sent, his mind went blank for a moment. When he came back to his senses, he was already driving, recklessly squatting downstairs like a pervert. When the three of them came back, He watched from the shadows. They were as intimate and familiar as in the photos, and he could sense the atmosphere even more directly than from the pictures. It was a harmonious family of 3. "You're married?" he asked again, his voice somewhat hoarse. Wendy's lips moved, then she said, "No." In that short time, without much consideration, she made a decision to lie. "Divorced." From the man just now. Wendy's eyes flickered, unnaturally avoiding his gaze, and said, "Amen," very softly. The two stood one above the other, each with their own thoughts. Wendy couldn't stand it anymore. She really wanted to escape this situation. Just as she was about to speak, the daughter sleeping on her shoulder suddenly made a few confused murmurs. She was startled and hurriedly patted gently, trying to coax her back to sleep. However, it was to no avail. Nina straightened up, yawning and rubbing her eyes. She said clingingly, "Mommy, why are we downstairs?" Struggling to get down as she spoke. Wendy couldn't control her, so she had to let go. Nina turned around and saw the strange uncle standing below. She tilted her head, then looked up at her mother. "Who are you?" Ethan walked up, crouched down on one knee and looked the child in the eye. "I am your mommy's friend," he said softly. The strange uncle looked at Nina with a complex gaze. She didn't understand it, but sensitively perceived that he seemed a bit sad. "Are you close? Should be okay. Then why have I never seen you? Because we haven't been in touch for a long time." Nina's eyes widened slightly. "Did you guys quarrel before?" The corner of Ethan's mouth hooked up. "Maybe, I don't know either." Wendy stood behind, looking down at the dialogue between the father and daughter who were meeting for the first time but didn't know each other. Reason told her she should end this as soon as possible and take Nina upstairs to avoid slipping up or having anything noticed. But listening quietly, her nose felt a bit sour. Nina crossed her arms and said seriously, "Did you make my mommy angry so she doesn't play with you anymore? My mommy has such a good temper." Ethan froze slightly, not speaking for a moment. "Nina." Wendy patted her daughter gently, signaling her not to talk nonsense. Ethan looked at the eccentric little girl in front of him and asked, "What's your name?" "My name is Nina Scott." The little girl obviously liked her name very much and introduced herself proudly. "Nina Scott," the man recited softly, then asked, "How old are you this year?" Just as Nina made a sound, she was pulled by her mother. "6, she's 6 this year." Nina turned her head to look at her mother in surprise. Noticing her nervous expression and the look she was giving, she very smartly didn't say much. "It's late," Wendy held her daughter's hand. "We're going back, you should go back too. Although I don't know why you are here today, don't do this in the future." "Goodbye," Ethan stood up. He still didn't explain, only whispering, "Sorry." Wendy held the person, signaled slightly, and turned around. "Wait a moment." Ethan suddenly stopped them, walked forward, leaned over, and patted Nina's head. "Nice to meet you, Nina." Wendy looked down and whispered, "Say goodbye to the uncle." "Goodbye, uncle." Ethan stood fixedly, watching the figures of the mother and daughter until they were out of sight. He looked down at his hand. There was a strand of hair just swiped from the little girl's shoulder. During the lunch break on a workday, Ethan sat in a coffee shop near the hospital waiting for someone. Before long, a woman wearing sunglasses bustled over and sat down. She took off her sunglasses, took a sip of coffee, and said with slight disgust, "I've said so many times I want sugar and milk added. It's bitter as hell." Ethan ignored her expressionlessly and said flatly, "You're late again." Faye grinned without a hint of guilt, behaving like a habitual offender. No need for pleasantries. She composed her expression, propped her elbows on the table, leaned in, and asked, "Did you really go squat under her building that day?" "Yeah." Seeing the other party admit it so frankly, Faye's expression was indescribable. "So did you see their family?" "Not a family." What do you mean?" Ethan looked down and repeated, "Not a family." "She said she's divorced. That man didn't go upstairs that day." Faye reacted for a few seconds, then said bluntly, "Dr. Wright, divorced means she was married. Besides, with a child and going out to play together, there must still be feelings." Ethan was silent, then after a long while spat out a sentence, "I don't mind a second marriage." Cough. Faye, who had just taken a sip of coffee, choked, coughed for a long time, and laughed. "You're assuming you can win her back just because she's divorced? How do you know she'll come back to you? We agreed originally that we would get married." "Bro, that was years ago. How long have you been broken up?" Ethan picked up the iced Americano in front of him and took a swig, avoiding this cruel reality. Looking at this childhood friend who seemed to never have emotional ripples, Faye suddenly remembered when he broke up with Wendy back then. With bloodshot eyes, he dialed that number over and over, sent message after message, but they all sank into the ocean, getting no response. Later, he found Wendy's friend Summer blocking her way to demand where that person went. Summer, who always had a bright smile and a great personality, said coldly and impatiently, "Wendy broke up with you. Stop thinking about pestering her." As she said this, her gaze glanced coldly at Faye, who was accompanying him. She didn't know why, assuming she was implicated just because she was Ethan's friend. The dumped Ethan didn't indulge in excessive drinking or smoking. He even maintained sanity and conducted group meetings and projects with high efficiency. Faye thought he might have adjusted quickly and moved on, but also remembering what he said during a casual chat not long ago, she felt a strong sense of contradiction and uneasiness. It wasn't until Ethan fainted at school and was sent to the ER that she realized the calm was all an act. He hadn't slept well for who knows how long, overworked, mentally tense, prone to anxiety and depression. Faye listened to the doctor's diagnosis and advice, frowning deeply, and the person involved lay quietly on the hospital bed, staring at the back of his hand where the IV needle was inserted, saying nothing. That was the most fragile and close to collapsing Faye had ever seen Ethan in all the time she had known him. She rested her chin on her hand. "But since you want to win her back, why drag me into lying and putting on a show? If I had no reason to find her, she might hide." Ethan lowered his eyes, looking at the ice cubes in the cup, seeming a bit distracted, and whispered, "She chased me first, then threw me away." Faye's dating history had always been straightforward with clear love and hate. She couldn't be bothered to understand this couple's awkward entanglement. "Whatever, as long as I don't have to show my face, just have your explanation ready." Ethan looked at his watch. Lunch break was almost over. He casually mentioned one last thing. "By the way, I took the little girl's hair for a DNA test." "Huh?" Faye's eyes widened. Ethan said without changing his expression, "She said the kid is 6, but I think she looks 7 or 8. And she looks a bit like me. Are you sure it's not your own delusion?" Faye held the complaint in her mouth and didn't say it, just gave a dry "oh," worrying for a second about her friend's mental state. Before parting, she suddenly became curious about her childhood friend's moral baseline and joked, "Hey, what if she's not divorced? What do you plan to do? Still hit on her?" Hearing this tease, Ethan turned his head to glance at the woman, not making a sound. "Okay, I get it." The tacit understanding of friendship growing up together allowed Faye to instantly read this look, lamenting that Ethan was now a biting mad dog that didn't bark. But watching his retreating figure, she sighed, secretly praying Wendy would be soft-hearted and let her friend regain what was lost. Late at night, Wendy sat in the studio, staring blankly at the wedding dress mannequin. After modifying some details, the final version of this wedding dress was complete. This was almost the work she had poured the most effort into. She found the best angle and lighting, sent it to that person, and asked when he would bring his fiancée to try on the dress. But she still hadn't received a reply. Wendy stood up and touched the dress cherishingly, an impulse surging in her lowered head. She wanted to wear this wedding dress, unbeknownst to anyone, even just once. Knowing this actually violated her professional ethics as a designer, she suddenly didn't care. Without a shop assistant's help, it was actually a bit difficult to put on. She put it on very slowly and carefully. When she stood in front of the full-length mirror, her breath hitched. Except for the one overhead, not many lights were on. Wendy stood under the soft light, staring blankly at herself wearing the wedding dress of her dreams. She had a messy bun, no makeup on her face, her complexion wasn't great, and she wasn't wearing beautiful high heels, just simple flat shoes. A somewhat mismatched outfit, a not quite beautiful self, but she suddenly felt satisfied. The corners of her mouth pulled up into a somewhat self-mocking arc, and her straight back relaxed wearily. Just as she was planning to take it off, another person's figure slowly walked out in the mirror. His gaze moved from Wendy's back to her front in the mirror. Wendy met his gaze in the mirror and started violently. "You, how come you're here?" Ethan replied faintly. "Didn't you say to see the finished product?" But, suddenly remembering the so-called finished product was being worn on her own body, Wendy's whole body stiffened, and a sense of embarrassment gradually welled up. She nervously grasped the skirt hem slightly, opening her mouth but not knowing what else to say. However, Ethan's expression was calm. His gaze swept slowly over the entire wedding dress, offering no questioning or accusation. "It's very beautiful. Sorry, I'll take it off right away." Even though it sounded like a compliment devoid of any emotion, Wendy felt even more at a loss, burning with shame all over. She hadn't even taken a step when Ethan called out to stop her. "Wendy, I have something I want to show you." He walked forward, took out a few folded papers from his coat pocket, and handed them over. Wendy took them confusedly. The moment she unfolded them, the words DNA paternity test crashed into her eyes. In an instant, it felt like all the blood in her body flowed backward to her brain, leaving her limbs cold and stiff. She froze for a few seconds, the paper in her hand crumpled tightly. She didn't look at the other content of this paper. The title was enough. Whatever the result, she knew it all too well. "You." Wendy turned to look at the man who had been silently observing her reaction, her pupils trembling slightly. "Why do this? When was it done? Where did the sample come from? How did he suspect?" A mess of questions surged in her brain, but not one was asked. There was no need to ask, as the result was right here. The rest wasn't important. Ethan finally spoke. "Why did you lie to me?" Wendy then realized that the calm on the man's face she perceived wasn't true tranquility. It was the result of desperately suppressing and restraining 1,000 emotions. It was the storm brewing, the volcano about to erupt. Wendy dared not look directly at his face, her eyes dodging, because there was no need. What no need? I wasn't necessary, right? Wendy's hand hung limply and she closed her eyes. "You're getting married." Ethan, who had been somewhat aggressive, was silent for a few seconds. Wendy breathed a slight sigh of relief while also feeling somewhat awful. Then, what about 8 years ago? Since reuniting, the topic of the past was brought up for the first time. Wendy froze, looking over subconsciously. She was surprised to find that the corners of Ethan's eyes seemed a bit red. The man walked closer step by step. "Why did you break up with me? Why didn't you leave a single word? Why did you suddenly disappear? Why? Did you leave me behind?" Wendy looked at him in a daze, backing away continuously until she hit the mirror. On the man's face were pain, resentment, sorrow, and confusion. He stood as close as possible, his hands slowly gripping Wendy's exposed shoulders, his strength so great it hurt Wendy a little. His back hunched slightly, allowing Wendy to look directly into his eyes and feel the emotions about to erupt from their depths. The face that made her fall in love at first sight kept enlarging before her eyes, appearing as if he were about to kiss her, when he tilted away. His cheek touched and rubbed lightly, his heavy breathing hitting her shoulder. Wendy blinked blankly. On her collarbone, a wet droplet fell, scalding hot to the heart. Before the age of 22, Wendy considered herself a very happy person. Her family was well off, her parents were harmonious, she had a best friend she could trust wholeheartedly. A lover she fell for at first sight and promised to marry, studying the major she liked, working towards her ideal. Although slightly imperfect, she was content and happy, thinking she would always be this happy. But who could have imagined that a sudden car accident would mercilessly take away her father? At that time, Ethan was abroad for an exchange seminar and was busy every day. When Wendy recovered from crying until she was exhausted, she found she had dialed his number. The phone rang for a long time with no answer. She called again and again like she was possessed. The last call finally connected, and Ethan's slightly tired and cold voice came from the other end. "Hello, what's up? I'm busy." The words Wendy was about to blurt out were suddenly swallowed back. She suddenly didn't know how to tell him. He was already very busy, very tired. There was no need to tell him something so heavy that he couldn't do anything about. She couldn't ask him to drop his work and rush back to the country to accompany her. So Wendy froze for 2 seconds and just whispered, "Nothing, I just missed you a bit. I'll be back in a while." Someone seemed to be calling on the other end, so Ethan hastily ended the call. "I'm hanging up now, text me if there's anything." Before Wendy could say anything, the beep sound came from the receiver. She held the phone, dazed for a long time. Later, when Wendy recalled that time, she always felt it was blurry, chaotic, and confused. Her mother had been with her father since she was very young. Having been pampered and living a privileged life for so many years, she had absolutely no ability to withstand such bad news crashing down. Company executives were eyeing them covetously. everyone plotting how to kick them when they were down and usurp power. Her mother wasn't willing to see her father's life's work go down the drain like this, but having never done it before, and with her physical and mental condition poor, she found it hard to support. Fortunately, Ryan was there to help. He was one of the students her father had sponsored. He entered the company to help after graduation, and his ability and character were both very good. Wendy was busy with her own school applications while taking care of her mother, and also had to learn about corporate matters from Ryan, busy enough to spin around. But she couldn't sleep well at night, always thinking of her dad and waking up crying even if she fell asleep. Once she finally had time, she video called Ethan. The man stared at his girlfriend on the screen with a frown. "Why have you lost so much weight?" Wendy just smiled and said casually, "Been a bit busy lately, tired." "You're not a child, learn to take care of yourself, be more mature." Hearing her lover, whom she missed day and night, speak in a cold tone, Wendy suddenly felt wronged, her eyes stinging. However, she just lowered her eyes and pretended to be natural, saying okay. Wendy thought then, just wait until he comes back. When he comes back, she would have someone to rely on, just hold on a little longer. The day Ethan returned to the country, he said he had jet lag and would contact her later. Wendy couldn't sit still and wanted to go find him, but was stopped by her mother. Her mother's complexion had been very bad since losing her husband. She pulled her daughter down to sit and told her that other company executives refused to let Ryan participate in management on the grounds that he was an outsider. Her eyes were red and swollen, her nerves taut. "We can't even protect your dad's life's work. What should we do, Wendy?" I'll learn, I'll take over, okay." "How can you do it? You can't." Her mother shook her head repeatedly. "And aren't you going to paint anymore? Not going to be a designer?" Wendy couldn't speak, remaining silent. Her mother's hand touched her face, eyes pleading. She said, "Wendy, get engaged to Ryan, okay? That way he's family, he'll have status." "Mom!" Wendy's pupils constricted, feeling this proposal was too absurd, but her mother's expression prevented her from speaking harshly. Her mother's swollen red eyes shed tears. "And I really feel like I can't hold on much longer. If I really go one day, knowing you're with Ryan, I'll be at peace. Mom really thinks Ryan is very good, and he has history with our family. You don't have feelings now, but after getting engaged and spending time together, maybe you will. Feelings can be cultivated. But Mom begs you, okay? Let Mom rest assured." Wendy lowered her head, afraid to look into those eyes, broke free, and ran out of the house. Her brain was a messy paste. The only clarity was to find Ethan. She gripped her phone and texted, "I'm coming to find you." The moment she stepped out of the elevator, she heard a man and a woman talking. "It's still better with you, Ethan. It'd be a huge loss not to marry you. Give it a rest." Ethan and Faye, the tone was intimate. Wendy leaned behind the wall, identifying blankly, smelling the faint scent of alcohol. "Didn't he say he was tired and wanted to get over jet lag? We haven't met for so long, and he didn't think of coming to find me, but he's drinking with his childhood friend at home. What did they talk about? What did they do? And what does getting married mean?" Ethan hadn't even replied to that message yet. "Hey, by the way, you're actually pretty serious about Wendy, aren't you?" Hearing her name suddenly, Wendy's heart tightened. Then a man's light chuckle rang out in the space, tone casual. "Is that so? To be honest, regarding her, I don't think I can use like." Wendy didn't finish listening. She turned and ran down the stairs of the emergency exit. On the way home, her heartbeat couldn't calm down for a long time. It wasn't the excitement of love at first sight, nor the nervous anticipation of the first-hand holding or kiss. It was panic, discomfort, pain, deception. She didn't sleep all night. In the latter half of the night, she finished packing, bought a plane ticket, and at dawn said to her mother, "I promise you." At the airport with people coming and going, Wendy looked down and opened the chat interface with Ethan. "Where are you?" Sent yesterday evening. Wendy didn't reply. Very slowly she typed, "Let's break up." In the supermarket, Wendy was standing in front of the refrigerated cabinet looking at yogurt dates. Nina suddenly stopped and pointed in a direction, making a surprised sound. "It's the uncle from last time." Wendy stiffened and turned to look. Reaching out and grabbing nothing, Nina had already excitedly run up to greet him. Ethan bent down, using the hand not holding the basket to catch the little girl who suddenly popped out and hugged his waist. subconsciously looking up to find the woman's figure the moment he recognized the smiling face. It had been a few days since the last time at the studio. That day, Ethan leaned against Wendy's cheek shedding tears, his repeated questioning receiving no response. Wendy was completely stunned in place, her raised hand daring not to fall, her thoughts a mess. "I'm going back first." When he spoke again, Ethan's voice was as calm as usual. Before she could see if his eyes were red and swollen, he had already turned and left. And she stood there, unable to recover for a long time. Wendy looked as if she hadn't been able to stop the child in time. Meeting his gaze, she was obviously somewhat at a loss, dodging and avoiding. "Uncle, we meet again. Hello, Nina." Ethan felt mixed emotions hearing this uncle, forcing a smile to respond. Nina was unusually enthusiastic, familiarly grabbing the man's hand and shaking it. "Uncle, are you alone? Shop with us." Wendy walked over, hearing this, gently pulled her daughter, whispering to stop her. "Nina, okay." Ethan looked at Wendy and said politely, "Will it be a disturbance?" "No." Nina skipped ahead, Wendy pushed the cart, and Ethan was beside her. She felt uncomfortable all over, twisting her neck to avoid seeing the man's face, but her mind kept replaying Ethan from that day. The little girl ran a bit far. The person beside her broke the silence first, asking in a low voice, "When do you plan to tell Nina?" Wendy gripped the handle tighter, ostrich mentality acting up again. "We'll see, there's no suitable timing right now." "Then when will there be?" "I don't know." Ethan sighed very lightly. "Have you never thought about telling her and telling me too?" Wendy had no response. That was indeed what she thought. "Why? Can you tell me the reason?" Ethan asked, suppressing his emotions. Because we ended, because you are getting married." Wendy spoke quickly in a low voice, her tone stiff. The first half referred to 8 years ago, the second half to now. Ethan turned his head, seeing only the woman's profile with pursed lips. The atmosphere was a bit stagnant. "You two are so slow," Nina, who had run off to grab a few boxes of snacks, popped out again, put things in the cart, looked up and criticized. The two people who were originally expressionless coincidentally smiled at the child. The topic stopped there. At the self-checkout counter, Wendy found she missed a necessity. "Mommy, go get it quickly, we'll wait for you here." Leaving the two of them alone, Wendy was a bit worried, but there was no other way. "I'll be back soon." Nina stood on tiptoes watching her mother's figure walk away, then turned and pulled the corner of the uncle's shirt beside her. She gestured for him to bend down. Looking mysterious and funny, Ethan cooperated by bending down and leaning his ear over. Blocking her mouth with her hand, Nina asked in a whisper, "Uncle, actually you are my dad, right?" Ethan's smiling expression froze, and he looked at the little girl in slight surprise. Seeing this expression, Nina felt she had guessed right. She was very excited. "Really? Really, really? Did I guess right?" Wait, Ethan steadied her and asked, "Why would you guess that?" Nina crossed her arms, looking proud. "My mommy has a junk box with lots of old stuff. I dug out a sketchbook of hers before, and it was all drawings of one person. When I saw you that day, Uncle, I thought you looked familiar. I went back and secretly found it to check, and she drew you. From the time Nina could remember, her mother told her that this family only consisted of her and Mommy, which might be a bit different from other families. She thought it was fine. Anyway, her Mommy was beautiful and gentle, and a very impressive designer. She loved her Mommy very much. And with Auntie Summer and Uncle Ryan keeping her company, having a dad or not didn't seem to affect anything. Nina didn't feel lonely, but she always felt her mother was very lonely. When they first returned to the country to open the studio, her mother always worked until very late. Often after coaxing her to sleep, she would go to the study to stay up late drawing. Once, she drank too much water before bed and groggily got up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. The light in the study was still on, shining out. After using the bathroom, she gently pushed the door open and found her mother sleeping prone on the desk. Nina walked over, tiptoeing to wake her mom. But she saw her mother's brows were slightly furrowed, her expression uneasy. Her eyelashes were wet as if she had cried. She was mumbling, uttering vague words in her sleep. Nina rarely saw her mother like this, fragile and helpless. She blinked and watched for a while, then shook her mother awake. When everyone said children were picked up from trash cans or given as bonuses with phone bills. A little classmate at school solemnly told everyone that children were born after adults fell in love and got married, carried in the mother's belly for 10 months. They were the crystallization of love. She thought, maybe mommy also fell in love or got married and then had her. Was she also the crystallization of love? Then who was that person and where was he? She secretly asked Auntie Summer. Auntie Summer first showed a somewhat sad expression, then looked a bit angry, and told her very seriously that that person was bad. Don't ask mommy, or it will make mommy sad. Nina nodded, seemingly understanding but not quite. Once when she was bored at home, rummaging around, she found a dusty junk box. Inside was a thick notebook, somewhat yellowed. Written on the cover were a few elegant characters she recognized as her mother's name. She put the notebook on the floor and lay on her stomach to flip through it. As she looked, she discovered that all the pages seemed to be drawings of the same person. She hadn't seen that person, but he looked quite good. She vaguely felt this person must be very special and important to mommy, otherwise why would she draw so much of him? But he was forgotten here. Remembering Auntie Summer's words, she didn't ask. That night when she first met Ethan, she sensitively noticed the atmosphere in the air seemed subtle. Mommy's state was very tense, like she was guarding against something, yet looking at that uncle with a gaze she had never seen before. When going upstairs, she asked Mommy, "Why did you lie just now? Aren't I 8?" Mommy lowered her head and smiled at her, whispering, "We won't see him again anyway, it's fine." She said, "Oh," and asked again, "Is he your old good friend? Did you really quarrel?" Mommy tilted her head with a smile thinking, then said, "Pretty much." "Then is he here to make up with you?" Mommy didn't speak, just shook her head gently. Nina saw the corners of Mommy's mouth hooked up in a smile, but it inexplicably felt very sad. She thought back to that person again, feeling he looked somewhat familiar. Thinking hard for a few days, Nina had a flash of inspiration and dug out the sketchbook she found before. It was him. She hugged the sketchbook and ran to the mirror, flipped to a front-facing page, held it next to her own face, and compared seriously. Looking carefully from top to bottom, she felt she looked a tiny bit like him. A bold idea popped up in Nina's mind. She felt that strange uncle was the bad person Auntie Summer talked about. He was her dad, and also the person who made Mommy lonely and sad. Excited like she cracked some secret code, but unable to verify it, and having no one to share it with. Holding it in for days, she actually bumped into him at the supermarket Total Destiny. Nina dragged him along, whispering. The sketchbook, Nina's words jogged Ethan's memory. He indeed knew about this sketchbook. In college, Wendy often hugged a notebook and went to study hall with him. While reading, his peripheral vision would always catch the person next to him zoning out again, sneaking peeks at him and drawing in the notebook. Wendy still kept it. Realizing this, Ethan felt a sense of relief in his heart, though not much. While he was dazing here, the little girl over there was jumping up and down. "So you really are my dad, right?" Ethan met her shining, excited eyes and nodded. "Yes." Nina cheered in a whisper, then pressed. "Then how did you make my mommy sad back then?" This question was a bit complex and hard to answer. Ethan hadn't figured out what to say when he glimpsed Wendy returning. "Nina, don't tell your mommy you know yet." Nina seriously made an okay gesture. Wendy jogged back, still panting a little. "Sorry for the wait. Did you guys talk about anything just now?" Her expression was obviously a bit nervous. Ethan said naturally, "Didn't say anything, let's go." "Okay." Exiting the supermarket, Wendy relaxed. "I live nearby, walked here so." "I live nearby too." Ethan said with a flat expression, "Let's walk together." Nina silently covered her wide open mouth. Wendy's eyes widened slightly, blinking rapidly. Champs-Élysées garden. The apartment complex Wendy lived in. "No, you," she was momentarily speechless, finding it absurd. "When did you move here?" "Checked it out a while ago, moved yesterday." "No wonder I never bumped into him living here for so long, but met him today," Wendy criticized silently in her heart. "But why did you move here?" Ethan said high-soundingly. "The complex looks nice and the surroundings are convenient." Wendy was silent for a while. "What about Faye Lewis?" She agreed. "Who is Faye Lewis?" Nina listened silently but didn't ask. Ethan stared at Wendy expressionlessly for a few seconds, reached out directly to take her bag. "It's fine." "Hey," the perfunctory answer was very unsatisfactory, but Wendy couldn't control where people lived. She walked on the side irritably, unable to figure out what Ethan was doing. Thinking of the wedding dress sitting straight in the studio waiting for someone to try it on for so long, she felt it was even more unethical. It couldn't be that he didn't cherish what he got and wanted to seek excitement right before marriage. But Ethan's character wasn't rotten to that extent, right? Did she not see clearly back then? Or did the person change after so many years? Thinking wildly all the way until entering the elevator, she abruptly turned to look at the person still by her side. He naturally pressed the floor button in the elevator, then Nina pressed one too. "Uncle, you live in the same building as us? MN." Nina's uncle sounded inexplicably strange, but Wendy didn't have time to think too much about it. Her mind was filled with Ethan's unintelligible actions. Their floor was lower. When the door opened, Wendy snatched back the stolen shopping bag, grabbed Nina, said goodbye rapidly, and left as if fleeing some scourge. Ethan just made a sound for "see you next time" when the elevator door closed. He looked at his reflection and smiled helplessly. Walking into the apartment decorated like a model home, a voice message came from his phone. Clicking it open, it was the little girl's lowered voice. "Uncle Ethan, if you want to win my mommy back, I can help you, but you have to promise you really, really love my mommy and will treat her really, really well." Ethan rejoiced that he added Nina's smartwatch contact at the supermarket just now. Smiling, he replied to her, "I will, thank you, Nina." Regarding having Ethan as a neighbor, Wendy initially felt very awkward. But after a while, she found that even living in the same building, they rarely bumped into each other, so the awkwardness wasn't that strong. It was just that going to the studio every day, facing that wedding dress standing there straight, she worried. She wanted to ask when he would bring the person, but didn't want to contact him proactively. Nina, on the other hand, had been acting strange lately, always pestering her asking this and that, or giggling while holding her smartwatch. Sometimes she seemed to be chatting with someone in her room. When asked, she said it was a classmate from school. But Wendy always adhered to a free-range policy and didn't manage too much. If she knew Nina was contacting Ethan, she would definitely be scared to death. There were too many blanks between Ethan and Wendy, too little understanding. Rare emotions of insecurity arose in his life, afraid of other unexpected things appearing. Fortunately, there was Nina, although she was also once a factor causing panic. She told Ethan everything he wanted to know in great detail. For example, whether she adapted when she first went abroad, if there were any aftereffects when giving birth to her, if starting the business was hard. Also, for example, what she liked to eat now, if she still liked vintage accessories, if she would still spend an afternoon sunbathing in the park. In the child's vivid narration, Ethan gradually pieced together Wendy's life that he hadn't participated in. In the morning, Wendy sent Nina to school. When the first floor elevator door opened, Ethan's figure appeared. Wendy was startled at first, wanting to say hi and leave quickly, but taking a second look, she found Ethan's complexion was surprisingly bad. "Good morning," he spoke, his throat a bit dry and hoarse. After speaking, he coughed a few times, his body shaking. Wendy hesitantly raised her hand, wanting to pat him to soothe his breath, asking, Are you okay? Just coming back?" "Yeah, night shift." Ethan looked up at her, seeming to have red blood vessels in his eyes. "Have a bit of a fever." Wendy turned pale with fright, disregarding everything else to support him. "Then why didn't you just rest at the hospital?" "Just didn't want to," Ethan said calmly, but inexplicably carried a pitiful implication. The man's exhaustion and discomfort were obvious. Wendy frowned, her heart softening. "Mommy," Nina tugged at her, looking up, "why don't you take care of Uncle Ethan after dropping me off? He looks really uncomfortable." "Huh, can you?" Ethan coughed twice again, looking up at her, his eyes a bit wet. Wendy hesitated. Maybe call your girlfriend." "Does Faye Lewis know?" Ethan looked strange for a second, then naturally lied to brush it off. "She's busy abroad, didn't tell her." The result was agreeing. After dropping Nina off and returning, Wendy waited for the traffic light, tapping the steering wheel with her finger and sighing, cursing herself for not being strong-willed. "What is this?" she muttered softly. Glancing casually at the side of the street, she suddenly paused as if seeing something. A car honk came from behind. Wendy snapped back to reality, started the car, and drove a distance. Her heart thumped a bit fast. After a few seconds, she turned the steering wheel to turn around and go back. She parked on the side of the road, got out anxiously, and trotted to grab the person she just saw. Faye. Faye Lewis? The woman was puzzled at first, then her eyes widened the moment she recognized Wendy's face. Wendy panted heavily, glancing at the man beside Faye, saying nothing. Faye probably read her expression, turned to exchange a look with the man, revealing a hint of guilt. The man was also confused. Your friend? Ah yes, wait for me in the car first, I'll chat with her for a bit. After sending the confused man away, Faye pulled Wendy aside. He is. Faye didn't wait for Wendy to finish her sentence, grabbing her wrist and speaking seriously and rapidly. That is my boyfriend. Really, the only one. Ethan and I are just childhood friends, nothing else. We aren't getting married, I'm not cheating or two-timing. He didn't know your thoughts and resented you a bit, so he lied to find you. She took a deep breath, shaking out her friend's secrets clean, and said the last sentence. He wants to get back together with you. When Wendy stood at Ethan's door pressing the doorbell holding pears, she still hadn't quite recovered. Ethan, wearing loungewear, opened the door looking sleepy. You came. Wendy responded blankly, the scene replaying Faye's words just now in her head. She lowered her head, avoiding his gaze, brushing past him to enter. Ethan didn't bring out guest slippers, but fluffy women's slippers. Wendy put them on silently, walked straight to the kitchen, and put the bag on the island. Did you take your temperature? Yeah, 37.5, acceptable. Wendy turned her back to the man. Why not lie down and rest? The person behind was silent for a while, then said softly, Because I wanted to wait for you, afraid you wouldn't come. Seeming to share a telepathic connection, they both remembered the final dialogue on the chat interface back then. I'm coming to find you. Where are you? Let's break up. Wendy's hand pressed on the countertop, tightening. Suddenly she couldn't hold it in anymore. I just ran into Faye Lewis. She turned around as she spoke, seeing a somewhat unexpected expression on the man's face. With her boyfriend. No need to say more, both knew clearly. Ethan stared at her silently for a few seconds, asking in a low voice, Are you angry? Wendy's hand supporting herself tightened. She shook her head. No, I lied to you once too. Call it even. The man stepped closer, reaching out wanting to hold her forearm, but missed. Wendy turned sideways to avoid him, feeling unbearable and sad inside. Even though she had already heard it from Faye, she still wanted to ask. So doing all this, what do you want? Ethan, sick, was obviously slow to react, yet surprisingly honest. He curled his empty hand, saying dazedly, Because I didn't want to break up with you. Her heart skipped a heavy beat. Wendy was dumbfounded, unsure how to react to Ethan's rare direct gaze. Subconsciously, she wanted to run. She tried to leave almost in a panic. I am leaving first. Before she took a few steps, her wrist was yanked back hard. The person grabbing her pushed her against the wall, his other hand cushioning the back of her head. Ethan's eye rims were slightly red, the breath he exhaled hot. Why are you leaving? Leaving me behind again? The hoarse voice made Wendy's nose inexplicably sour. She lowered her eyes, daring not to make eye contact. I know about what happened to your family back then, Ethan said very slowly. Why didn't you tell me? Am I not worth trusting? You were too busy. Wendy let out a weak voice. I can be told even if I'm busy. Ethan slowly rested his head on the woman's shoulder, his high nose bridge rubbing against her neck, murmuring, You are the most important. The gentle touch caused a shiver in Wendy, and hearing the words made her heart tremble. Her pupils constricted, her fingers wanting to push him away trembled. But you. Wendy wanted to say something, say you obviously ignored me countless times, say you obviously didn't remember my things, say you obviously didn't care about me, say you obviously didn't regard me that importantly. But her throat choked up. Messy words were stuck there, unable to utter a single accusation. Wendy thought maybe she assumed wrong. She thought Ethan liked Faye, but actually, they were indeed just friends growing up together. She thought her leaving had no impact on Ethan, but actually, he seemed quite sad. She thought Ethan had no feelings for her, but actually, maybe he really did like her. Ethan's body was very hot, burning into chaotic consciousness, mumbling Wendy's name in his mouth. Can we not break up? I did wrong. Tell me where you're unhappy, okay? Don't leave me. I missed you so much, Wendy. Wendy listened blankly, feeling the person in front of her was fragile and strange. Her past perceptions were vaguely overthrown and reorganized, her heart filled with contradiction, doubt, sadness, and trance. He seemed to love her very much. She just didn't know. Ethan had always been someone with no particular likes or dislikes towards anyone or anything. He followed his family's requirements, maintained good grades, entered medical school, would take over the family hospital later, and then marry someone of equal social standing. A very boring life. Seemed like every step was correct, nothing bad about it. Anyway, he didn't have any other ideas. Until that person appeared. Wendy was like a disorder appearing in his regular life, the only conspicuous bright color in black, white, and gray, the one wrong note in a memorized piano piece. She crashed around recklessly, regardless of consequences, always popping out brightly from somewhere unknown, then saying, "What a coincidence, Mr. Scholar." Ethan had never lacked suitors around him growing up. He knew all too well what the look of liking someone was like. Wendy bounced around him with those sparkling eyes. But unlike those people before, Ethan didn't reject such closeness. He acquiesced, then waited. Shouldn't liking someone involve a confession? When would she confess? As for how Ethan would reply after the confession, he hadn't thought it through, but he wouldn't refuse. Once again, when Wendy followed him to study hall but fell asleep on the desk, he rarely stopped his own things, just quietly watching the person next to him. Her face was small, buried in her arms, revealing only a little bit. Her eyelashes were long, making one want to touch them. The library heating blew hot, but when Ethan reached out to gently grasp Wendy's hanging hand, he found it was still cool. So he held it and didn't let go immediately. A message came on his phone. Faye announced to the world in their group chat that she was officially in a relationship. Messages of friends teasing and asking questions quickly pushed that one up. Ethan lowered his eyes watching, saying nothing. There was a scar on Faye's jaw from when little Ethan pulled her and she accidentally fell. Little Faye cried for a long time, saying she was disfigured, saying she wouldn't be able to get married later. Little Ethan had a headache listening, just wanting her to stop crying, so he said, "If no one wants you, just marry me." It was indeed effective. Little Faye sniffled blankly, then said okay. Maybe because of the guilt from bullying her in childhood, or maybe because of this agreement. Ethan was always very tolerant towards Faye. Taking care of her became a habitual thing to do. The two families actually intended to unite by marriage, mentioning it often when eating together. Ethan had no thoughts. Faye grew up with him anyway, they got along okay, better than some random young miss. But Faye's face always looked a bit bad. She dragged Ethan, tone agitated. "No, do you really want us to marry? Why aren't you saying anything?" Ethan frowned, feeling strange. "Isn't it agreed since childhood?" Faye obviously didn't remember this much, thinking hard for a while before recalling. "No, bro, wasn't that a joke said in childhood? How can you remember and take it seriously?" Faye felt Ethan had overly good memory, so sometimes his brain circuit was different from normal people. Ethan wasn't annoyed either, saying calmly, "Anyway, we both have to marry partners arranged by family. Isn't this just right? What's good about it?" Faye said indignantly, "Ethan, I definitely want to marry someone I like, understand? Do you have someone you like?" Before Ethan made a sound, she waved her hand answering herself. Definitely not. Indeed not, but Ethan said, "Marriage is essentially an exchange of interests. Liking is abstract. If it's really important to you, I can try." "Stop, stop, stop." Faye made a big cross sign at him, face full of disdain. "Impossible for you to like me, with those dead eyes of yours." Ethan actually didn't quite understand why Faye insisted on marrying so-called liked people. Feelings cannot last long, just like those suitors stopped coming after a while. The group chat was in full swing. Faye messaged him privately. "Hey, I'm dating now, don't mention anything about getting married anymore. You like him? Of course, otherwise why date him? How are you sure you like him? Liking is liking, it's a feeling, you know. Anyway, liking someone makes you want to be with them forever." Faye's explanation was vague, completely without reference value. Ethan woke Wendy up absent-mindedly, then walked on the campus at night. He thought about what the feeling Faye mentioned actually was, thought about why people pursue things like love, thought about why Wendy still hadn't told him she liked him, thought about if Wendy would stop coming after a while too. Thinking of this, he stopped. He found that merely imagining Wendy not looking for him anymore seemed to put him in a bad mood, so he said, "Want to date?" Maybe he would like her. For a long time, Ethan saw Wendy drawing a dress. He leaned over to look, recognizing it should be a wedding dress with his limited clothing knowledge. Assignment? No, Wendy's ears were a bit red, shaking her head. Designed for myself. I want to focus on this direction later, too. Ethan looked down at that incomplete design, involuntarily imagining what the person beside him would look like wearing it. Ghost at the wheel, he opened his mouth saying, "Wendy, let's get married when we graduate." The girl was obviously bewildered hearing this, turning her head blankly. He grabbed her fingers and squeezed, tone coaxing. Okay." Wendy's face was bright red, corners of mouth couldn't help curling up. "Okay, but you have to propose formally. This doesn't count." Although he still believed marriage was essentially an exchange of interests and human emotions, didn't last long. But at the same time, he clearly realized he wanted to be with this person for a long time. When Ethan was attending a seminar abroad, he passed by a handmade jewelry shop. The shop was decorated warmly and exquisitely. The owner was an old granny who also did fortune-telling. She looked at Ethan smilingly, recommending a vintage enamel ring to him. "Do you have a girlfriend?" "Yes." "Then take it, I'll bless you." Ethan never believed in mystical things, but he bought it. Because the ring was indeed beautiful, Wendy would definitely like it, and he missed her very much. He specially found a designer to order a diamond ring, planning to find a chance to propose after returning to the country. Halfway through adjusting to jet lag, Faye came to the door carrying a bottle of wine, eyes red, obviously having cried. Ethan hadn't been awake for long, very helpless. "What happened?" Faye found 2 cups and poured wine, saying indignantly, "I got dumped, drink some with me. Where are the others?" Ethan sat on the sofa, taking a sip from the cup. "They laugh all day and don't know how to comfort people. Why look for them?" Faye gulped a mouthful. "Of course you don't know how to comfort people either, but at least you won't say things that are more annoying." Ethan was noncommittal, listening emotionlessly to Faye's long critique or cursing of her ex-boyfriend, occasionally giving a few sentences of analysis and evaluation. Thinking about going to see Wendy later in his mind, a message from her came on his phone. Ethan glanced at it, put down the phone looking at Faye, who was obviously drunk, naturally speeding up the topic progress, quickly ending and starting to chase the guest out. "He's a bastard, I tell you." Faye was still cursing while changing shoes, excitedly almost losing balance. Ethan steadied her, opening the door. Faye suddenly sighed, eyes wet, saying, "Don't know why, now I feel what you said before actually makes sense." "Is that so?" Ethan raised an eyebrow slightly. "I don't quite think so myself anymore." Faye scoffed, joking, "Ethan, it's still better with you. It'd be a huge loss not to marry you." Ethan obviously didn't take it seriously, retorting flatly, "Give it a rest." The woman held the wall, preparing to leave, suddenly remembering something and turning back to ask, "Hey, by the way, you're actually pretty serious about Wendy, aren't you?" Thinking of that person, the ends of Ethan's eyes unconsciously carried a smile. "Is that so? To be honest, regarding her, it seems I can't use like to describe it, maybe it's love. Anyway, we are getting married." Faye burped drunkenly in a daze, lamenting, "Thought you practiced the path of heartlessness, turns out you're a romantic." Sending away his childhood friend, Ethan leaned on the sofa waiting for Wendy to come over. Accidentally falling asleep for a few hours, no sign of anyone in the room. He asked strangely, no reply, until the next day he was dumped. Wendy disappeared. Ethan thought about the reason for her leaving, asked around about the accident in her family, associating it with Wendy's abnormality during the time abroad. He regretted his dullness and neglect, and blamed Wendy for her distrust and lack of candor. But he still didn't know why she had to end this relationship unilaterally in such a decisive and unsparing way. He resented, hated, cried, and finally found he still missed her the most. At a friend's wedding 8 years later, he heard women chatting, saying the bride's wedding dress was very special. The bride lifted her skirt charmingly, saying proudly, "Found a handmade wedding dress studio. The designer is amazing and very pretty. What's the name?" Faye leaned over interestedly. She had a very good relationship with her current boyfriend, reaching the stage of discussing marriage. "The studio is called Moment, the designer is called." Searching on her phone, Faye suddenly widened her eyes as if seeing something incredible. "Called Wendy Scott, the name sounds nice too, right?" Ethan's hand holding the scalpel shook uncontrollably. The cup fell onto the carpet, making a muffled sound. He looked at that dark stain expressionlessly for a few seconds, looking up at Faye. She turned the phone over, showing the searched page. The person he missed day and night was smiling softly and taking a photo with a client looking somewhat unfamiliar. Ethan stared deadly, his eyes feeling astringent. Found you. Sam felt the boss was a bit strange lately. Before she could always work in the studio, until dark, drawing and making clothes focused enough to forget eating and drinking. Now, he often saw her suddenly zoning out or staring at her phone in a daze. But the expression couldn't tell if it was joy or distress, seeming like just simply thinking. Anyway, pretty weird. Wendy herself didn't know the employee's silent observation. At this time, she was pondering how to reply to the message Ethan just sent on her phone. Nina said this Sunday is her birthday. Can I celebrate with you guys? Last time Ethan was sick, leaning on her shoulder talking nonsense. She adhered to the principle of kindness, helping him to bed to rest. When leaving, she was pulled again. Ethan burned confusedly, eyes narrowing, whispering, "Are you leaving again?" Wendy was silent for a while, somewhat ruthlessly brushing his hand away, but saying, "I'll cook something for you. Burning like this, I'm afraid something will happen. I'll leave when Nina gets out of school." Ethan looked at her blankly, suddenly remembering something. Nina, she knows. HM? Wendy didn't react at first, suddenly realizing what he said, eyes widening. What? Ethan felt wronged and guilty being stared at. I didn't say it, she guessed it. Wendy went back to interrogate Nina at night, getting the answer simply laughing and crying speechless. So she was always the one kept in the dark. The little girl grinned. Mommy, how is Uncle Ethan? Wendy glanced at her sideways, crossing arms, leaning close, asking, Didn't you recognize your father, still calling him Uncle Ethan? Mommy, you haven't forgiven him yet, Nina said crisply. Have to see his performance. Wendy wanted to cry but had no tears. Her feelings for Ethan now were very complex. Misunderstanding cleared, feelings confessed, saying she wasn't moved was impossible. But the hurt caused back then was real. The 8-year gap lay solidly there too, unable to be completely without grudges. Maybe they just weren't suitable. Maybe Ethan was just obsessed. Maybe there would be new problems in the future. 19-year-old Wendy crashed around, doing whatever she thought of, bright and passionate. 30-year-old her seemed to lack that courage and confidence, hesitating. Her finger hovered over the keyboard for a few seconds, still typing a reply. Wendy wonders if Nina is willing, sure. So on Nina's 9th birthday, a new guest was welcomed. Little girls gathered together whispering, Nina, who is that? Never saw him last year. He's so handsome. Is he your relative? Nina supported her forehead with her finger, looking mysterious. Humph humph, regarding this, can't say for now. Good friends made sounds of boredom, laughing and messing around together. Summer, sitting on the sofa, silently listened to all the whispers, bit the apple fiercely, staring unkindly at the figures of those two in the kitchen. Hey, hold back your expression a bit, you'll scare the kids later. Ryan beside her said amusingly. I'm angry, Summer shouted in a low voice. Reconciled just like that? She sighed heavily, face full of wishing iron could turn into steel. Probably not yet, Ryan peeked, patting the person beside him on the shoulder. Don't be angry, if they really reconciled it might not be a bad thing. You saw Wendy all these years, how tired she was. Summer stabbed a piece of apple, putting it in her mouth, pondering silently. And the two in the kitchen at this time. I'll help arrange it, take her to check in a few days. Talking about Nina's cavity problem, hurting badly now and then recently, needed to check ASAP. Okay. Wendy looked down plating, saying nothing more. Ethan helped wash cups, finding a topic. Busy lately. Did you rest well? Wendy's movement suddenly paused, as if remembering something. She pursed her lips. I still have something to ask you. Since the fact is like this now, how to handle that wedding dress? Does Faye Lewis still want it? Ethan put the dried cup on the countertop, making a soft sound. Has nothing to do with her. Wasn't her wanting it anyway. He had just rinsed, fingertips still carrying coolness, gently gripping Wendy's forearm, looking down at her. That wedding dress originally belonged to you. You can handle it however you want. You want to sell it to someone else or throw it away or just keep it, all okay. But if you are willing to be with me again, hope you will wear it. You look very beautiful wearing it. Wendy looked at that hand loosely circling herself, following up to meet Ethan's serious look. She wanted to run again, but held back this time. Pretending to joke, she laughed, saying, What about the balance payment then? Nobody paying me anymore. Ethan revealed a helpless expression. I'll pay, Miss Scott. Summer, watching here all along, widened her eyes. No, why touching? Why smiling? What are they saying? According to the agreed time, Wendy took Nina to the hospital to check her teeth. Ethan only came out for a while, taking them to the department, arranged a few things, then left in a hurry. Go busy yourself. Okay, text me if anything. When the disturbance happened, Wendy was holding Nina's hand going downstairs. Many people surged in one direction, whispering and craning necks. Wendy didn't know why, looking around not knowing what happened. What's up with the 5th floor? Heard he came with a knife. Oh my God, how big of a grudge to use a knife. I just heard that man's wife died from post-operative complications. He insists it's the doctor's surgery problem. Coming here to cause trouble. Is anyone hurt right now? Don't know. Hey, I also heard actually that man didn't treat his wife well. Eyelids suddenly twitched. A strong uneasiness rose inexplicably in Wendy's heart. Mommy. Nina heard too, pulling her somewhat scared. It's okay. Wendy smiled comfortably at her, clicking open her phone to message Ethan. Something happened at the hospital, right? Are you okay? She gripped the phone nervously, receiving no reply, settled Nina in the convenience store in the lobby. Nina, wait here a bit, I'll go upstairs to check. Ethan's department was on the 5th floor. In the elevator, Wendy's heart beat heavily, making her uncomfortable. She trotted out, seeing the gathering crowd at a glance. In the middle of the circle, several security guards pinned down a middle-aged man with a ferocious face. The knife in his hand fell on the ground, having bright red blood stains on it. There were also shocking drops on the floor. The man was still shouting. Let go of me, you unconscionable people. Wendy lightly patted a watching lady, asking, Excuse me, may I ask this blood is? The lady, with a face of creating bad karma, leaned close, saying, Oh my, this troublemaker just heard a doctor slashed a big cut, seems gone to handle it now. I even know that doctor, very nice person. Wendy didn't listen to what the lady said afterwards. She ran away panicking, staring at the signs, finding the treatment room. The door wasn't closed, voices vaguely coming through. Lucky didn't hurt the nerve, otherwise your hand would be useless. How to hold a scalpel then? Not that exaggerated. Ethan's voice. Bad guess confirmed, dropping like a stone in the heart, smashing painfully. Wendy walked step by step to the door. A doctor-looking person faced away packing tools. And that person sat on the facing bed, looking down at the right arm wrapped full of gauze, no expression on his face. As if sensing something, he looked up, then froze slightly. Stitches already, and saying, not exaggerated, you really are. Chester Stone caught the man's line of sight out of the corner of his eye, shut his mouth, looking over confusedly. What is this devoted couple atmosphere? I'll retreat first. Chester put on a business smile, greeting while leaving. Hello, looking for Doctor Wright? You guys chat. Wendy pulled out a trace of an arc at the corner of her mouth, nodding in response. Hello? The third person left, even closing the door conveniently. Wendy leaned on the door, gaze staring straight at that dazzling white. That white suddenly moved. Ethan reached out to her. Wendy, come here. She walked over, pulled to stand between the man's legs, closer distance. Ethan raised his hand to rub the corner of her eye, tone helpless. Why crying? I'm okay. Originally, Wendy was still a bit dazed, not realizing she cried. Until Ethan raised his hand to wipe, she blinked, tears falling suddenly. She opened her mouth, starting to explain. I just came down, then they said there was trouble. You didn't reply to my message. I was afraid something happened to you. A while ago, that news, the medical disturbance one, The tone was steady at first, becoming somewhat incoherent towards the end. Okay, aren't I fine? Ethan carefully caught the falling tears of the person in front, soothing softly. Wendy's fingertips trembled belatedly. A while ago, there was medical disturbance news. The bereaved family brought people to cause trouble in the hospital to demand high compensation, lost control emotionally, and accidentally stabbed a doctor to death. Wendy dared not think if the scene got out of control today, if that person was a desperado, fighting to the death, whether Ethan could still sit here properly now. She put her hand very lightly on the man's gauze-wrapped forearm, asking with a hoarse voice, Is the injury heavy? It's okay, just a few stitches, not a big problem. Ethan said, pretending to be relaxed. However, Wendy didn't heave a sigh of relief. Stitches already? Tears just started falling again, she sniffled. Hurts? Ethan laughed and cried, looked at her for a few seconds, whispering, still hurts a little. Then he saw Wendy's mouth puckered. Are you very worried about me? Ethan followed the forearm to hold Wendy's two hands, gently interlocking fingers, filling the gaps. Hearing no response, he shook his hand. Speak. Amen. Wendy turned her head, not looking at him, responding muffledly. Ethan hooked the corner of his mouth, forcibly leaning his face over to look at her face to face. Wendy, I always wanted to ask but didn't dare to ask you. You still like me, right? Wendy lowered her eyes, somewhat stunned, didn't answer. Ethan continued saying, I thought about a lot. Before it was me who didn't do well, didn't let you feel enough love and security. I didn't believe in things like love before, thinking it was ethereal, without value, but you are different. Your appearance overthrew all my past concepts. Wendy, I love you very much. Maybe hearing it now you feel it's hollow, but can you just give me a chance to start over? She looked up, finding the corners of the man's eyes somewhat red, pupils having water light. Heart felt a bit sour, even more soft. You love crying so much now. Her lips pursed into an arc. Ethan also smiled, suppressing his voice, saying, acting pitiful, want you to feel sorry for me. Wendy couldn't help chuckling. She felt like the door of her heart, closed all year round, was slowly opening after experiencing continuous knocking, trying to accept the person insisting on waiting there. That person never left, only she refused to face it all along. The heartbeat and courage from youth seemed to return to her body, surging to limbs like a warm current, then driving her to act. Ethan stood up, let go of hands, tentatively reaching for her back. Wendy blinked, stood on tiptoes, hugging his neck first. The man subconsciously accommodated, bending down, arms bringing the person close, hugging tighter. He heard by his ear, Ethan, let's start over. His heart beat heavily, dazed for a few seconds, buried in Wendy's neck, laughing as if relieved of a heavy burden. Thank you, Wendy. They hugged quietly for a few seconds until Wendy's phone ringtone rang. She rubbed her eyes, connecting. Mommy, where are you? Why gone for so long? The crisp child's voice was loud. Ethan heard too. They looked at each other, smiling together somewhat embarrassedly. Nina sat on the convenient store chair, swinging her legs boredly. Mommy really wouldn't have forgotten me, she muttered softly. Finally, the expected person appeared in sight. She jumped down, just preparing to shout, suddenly noticing some differences. Mommy had Uncle Ethan walking beside her. They were close, saying a sentence or two occasionally. Hospital was crowded, noisy. He turned slightly sideways, listening patiently. Both faces seemed to carry some smiles. Mommy's face had some blush, different from before somewhere. Nina tilted her head, thinking, until they walked close. Wendy bent down, saying apologetically, Nina, sorry, kept you waiting long. Ethan also leaned over. I got off work, let's go back together. Only saw Nina blinking big eyes, froze for a few seconds, then suddenly grinning a big smile. She pounced, hugging Wendy's neck, shouting, Mommy, then turned to the other person, shouting the title called for the first time in her 8-year small life. Daddy, maybe people aren't born knowing how to love, always growing in stumbling and crawling. Some are dull, slow, some are direct, passionate. Sometimes covered in sweetness, sometimes producing suspicion and pain. But fortunately, someone will always be there, someone will always be brave. The unfinished agreement, after being late for many years, is finally to be realized.